Hello, I'm Omar Paul, environment artist in games industry, and in this video we'll be talking about the importance of sculpting in hard surface modeling, something that many beginner level artists are actually missing out on. It is often taught that sculpting is for something like character artists or organic modelers should do, when in most of the cases, especially for hard surface modeling, it is being used a lot to add smooth bevels and achieve the high poly effect in most of the hero props and assets that's out there in the industry. And in this video I've got this very simple mesh in front of me. Just think of it as a basic, very primitive hard surface model. And as you can see, I've got sharp edges all across the mesh with no bevels whatsoever, and I've got this cylinder that's kind of just laying in front of it, which is totally not attached to the surface. Now, with the help of sculpting, we'll be able to achieve smooth bevels on our high poly without any kind of shading issues that we'll run across. And most importantly, in this case, I want this cylinder to fuse on this face, which is something that we'll be able to achieve during our sculpting process. And then we'll bring into the Substance Painter and bake that high poly to low to show you how you can actually get away with sharp edges on certain objects without needing to bevel your low poly, add more geo, and waste time trying to fix the shading issues. Now, I will add some notes during the way because it's not just as simple as doing this process, and I will also add a link of a tutorial by Dylan Abernathy, which is an environment artist in the industry, highly skilled, and he's got an extensive tutorial for a typewriter, which he basically does a lot of that process, bringing in meshes from his 3D software into the ZBrush for sculpting and adding the extra details necessary there for achieving the high poly. So I've got this shape, as you can see. Like I've said, it's all hard edges all across, and I want this cylinder to fuse, so on and so forth and whatsoever. So I'll just hit export for the ZBrush. It's an add-on that I'm using. I'll also try to find the source and add the add-on link. I think it's supposed to be free, if I'm not recalling it wrong. You can just, with an instant button, you can launch it to ZBrush, which will get you there. Now again, just a quick note, you could do this in Blender, which I'll just show briefly. This sculpting process, you could definitely sculpt in Blender, but since ZBrush is tailored for such thing, I would highly suggest you to have the software one way or another to, you know, make your life much more easier. Now I've got this mesh in front of me again, imported from Blender, and there's something called Dynamesh in ZBrush. It's basically a subdivision of the surface into 100% quads, but very dense. The thing about the Dynamesh is that it's so accurate. I haven't seen any add-on in Blender or Maya or anything like that that's ever close to it, and you don't have to define like creases and certain sharp edges whatsoever. It's just that higher the resolution you go, the more of the form of the shape will hold out, and it's much, I don't know, maybe 10 times, 20 times faster than any other software out there. And Dynamesh is just basically that. We've got a slider. Now, because this is not a tutorial on how to use ZBrush and so on and so forth, I'm just going to get into it. I highly would suggest you to, if you're not familiar with ZBrush at all, just basic primitive things like moving around some certain like navigation in the UI should be enough for an hard surface artists, because we're not doing any organic modeling. Like, you know, we don't use extensive tools. We just want to achieve the high poly that we want. I've got the resolution slider here, which will, the more I increase, the higher the density of the mesh will be. So let's just try to play around. Let's see. Yeah, 1 million is enough for this. And the moment instantly, you'll notice on our cylinder here, it's actually started to fuse, which is exactly what I wanted. And if we actually look at the poly, the geometry of our mesh in this case, you can see it's very dense, and it's 100% made up of quads, and that is the power of ZMesh. And as you have noticed, it's pretty quick. Like, we got 100 million active points, 1 million active points instantly, which was like real fast. Of course, that'll depend on your computer, but most of the cases it is quite quick and much quicker than any software out there. Now we've got this dense mesh in front of us, and what we could do, we have also sliders, polish, polishify features, and polish crisp edges. Now, crisp edges are mostly the most accurate one when it comes to hard surface models, but you have to define your sharp edges prior bringing into the ZBrush as well. So the more you take time on your low poly and adjust its UVs and sharp edges, so on and so forth, the better results that you'll get also in ZBrush as well. But in this case, just for the sake of this video, I'll just keep this polish, like give it a 1 level of polish, and immediately you'll see the bevels are starting to look up. I'll also add, let's say, like 2 levels of polished crisp edges, a little more, let's see, like 4 again. We could go a little more, let's say 7. And the more you do it, actually, it's applying, it's resetting back on the slider, but it's also applying it. And now, as you can see, it's got these beautiful bevels all across. And I have got this beautiful fuse of the cylinder into the mesh, onto the face itself, which is perfectly. This is looking pretty nice. Now, this is possible. This is not magic. This is possible just because we have extremely dense mesh. Again, you could do this in Blender, you could do this in Maya or any other 3D software. It's just that, again, this is faster, more accurate, and always better, most of the cases. Now, in most instances, especially if it's like weapon or a metal that could be dent and has some storytelling on it, we usually do something called like trim pass. Basically, we've got this brush called trim dynamic, and we basically go over the edges, kind of like adding soft edge wear detail here and there. Now, this is not always the case. If it's like a brand new product, of course, like, or something that might not have dents and bends, you don't have to do this. The bevels should get you there. But any other kind of details like carvings or other things that you might not be able to get or do easily in Blender or through other software, you could easily do this on here. Like, let's say you want to, if it's like a weapon and you want to like add a 24 texture, you could just get an alpha, apply it to the brush, and then stroke it, and then have that elevated 24 geometry on top, and then you could just bake that detail down. For the sake of this video, what I'll do is to show you, I'll add like kind of a small kind of damage here, almost like as if it's chunked off. Maybe make it a little smaller, and then I'll show you this how it actually shows in the bake itself. All right, so we've got these smooth bevels all across, looking good. What do I want to do more? Let's see. Maybe we could like also go about here a little. So this is the fun process where you actually get to have the creative decision of doing whatever you want. And after that, I'll just, before I actually bring in, I think it'll be name clash and overwrite. So I'll just name this cube LP, low poly. And then I'll hit import on, and then I'll just go Z. Now that's the thing, as you can see, bringing in even a million active point mesh inside Blender takes time. I've opened the Blender and it just imported now. These softwares are not really made to handle such dense meshes anyways, so ZBrush for me is personally the way to go. And we've got imported our high poly. Let's just shade smooth, and as you can see, we've got our edge wear. And again, for the sake of this video, I'm keeping this extremely simple, but we've got our bevels, which is pretty nice, so on, and looks pretty good. Now for the low poly, I've already set this UVs like pretty simple on the sharp edges. Again, for the sake of it, I'm keeping it as simple as possible. So let's just go to UV and let's just unwrap. I think that should do it, really. There's nothing much else that we could, I don't know how the cylinder is actually looking. Maybe we could get rid of this cylinder, like, I don't know. I'll just keep it as it is. Now, one thing to note, since we have hard edges and, our high poly has pretty smooth borders like bevels, it is best if you have enough budget for yourself to actually bevel the silhouette of the prop itself as well, at least for like 2 or 3 segmented bevels. If you can, that would be perfect, since when you bake it, it'll catch much crisper on the edges of it, and it'll be much better. But for the sake of this video, to show how actually even without it, the bevels are capable of holding pretty well on the bake, I'll keep them sharp. But if you can, to have much better results, in most of the cases we actually do it on the silhouette of the mesh, which is like, you could think of it as borders of the mesh. We try to give it at least 2 segmented bevels, so when we're baking it, the bake catches on them much better and crisper as much as possible. But again, for the sake of this video and to show you that how actually it looks pretty decent, I'll keep this sharp. So I'll just go hit export. Oops. As an FBX, let's go to and just add it to desktop. I'll call this cube LP, and I'll just export it out. Right, I'll do the same for our high poly. We don't, of course, need UVs for our high poly, just with anything. And I'll just call this HP, and we'll export. Now we could export this directly in ZBrush as well, but I wanted to visualize that everything is looking decent and that the scale and size is correct, and also do a little bit of shade smoothing here as well to have the best result that I would want. Now let's open up our file inside our Substance Painter. So LP, there we go, we got our mesh, and I'll just go into the baking tab, go to the high definition meshes, and bring in my high poly. Let's see. I'll just increase the frontal distance so there is enough we can catch on. So let's just try to increase it a little. We could keep this as well. So I'm just gonna play around with the settings and I'll bake and come back. Right, so we've done our bake, and almost immediately you can see that we have bevels in our low poly, which is really, really nice. I mean, I've just added a basic color and dropped down the roughness to visualize it better. But if you look at the edges, especially like here, how the bevels are shining, although we had perfectly sharp edges around there. Now, if you do look carefully at certain angles, you would realize that it actually is a sharp angle. But if you especially care about your bakes a little more and spend time on your UVs, if you have baking, you should just try to fix those out. You'll always get better results. Now, as I've said, for the sake of the silhouette at certain angles, like this looks pretty sharp, even though we have the bubbles. When looked at, especially more in orthographic manner, it might be obvious that it is kind of like a low poly. So to get rid of that, you could add one or not one, but at least 2 segmented bevels for the silhouette to catch on that more crisper bake, so that the reflections, even on certain angles, look much complement the bake itself even more further. But even then, as you can see, we have these. Look how beautifully the light is shining through the bevels and looks alright. Now we do have technically a baking issue here. It's not exactly that, but the reason this is happening is because on our real mesh, let's just turn this off. We really don't have any connection between the face and the cylinder here. So to fix that, what you could do is you could lift this off a little bit and then kind of like extrude it out, and then do kind of this, try to give that, add one more level of, as if bevel it out, so that there is at least a decent, face that the bake can actually catch on to. Whereas here it's just a really sharp transition between, like, it's not sharp, it's exactly 90-degree transition. Therefore it's a little bit too obvious. But even then, especially like with that angles where the light is hitting it, you can definitely tell as if it's like being conjoined to the surface, which it was in our high poly. You can see our edge wear, like kind of the damage that we've done in sculpting. It's also available here, which we didn't have any geometric detail to actually hold on to. So this process is useful for basically most of the hero props or assets that you're doing in games, and this is extremely used in the industry. And the reason I've done this video is it's definitely for beginner artists that are missing out, hard surface artists that are missing out on something called sculpting. We're actually not doing any sculpting. It's just that we are utilizing the power of, in this case, ZBrush or high dense meshes for the sake of our cells. And before I close it off, I wanted to also show you, I'm just going to take this back. I wanted to show you how I could actually achieve this in Blender 2, just a very quick way. If you go into the modifiers and go to generate and do something called remesh, you'll actually see that it's exactly the same thing. You're just going to lower the value to get more even denser mesh. But the thing is, even I start to go down, it's starting to chug a lot. And I'm not even like at certain, like it's not even probably a million anyways, but it's starting to chug a lot, and it's definitely harder to achieve the same results. It's just that ZBrush is much better, but this is the way that you can actually do it. Same on ZBrush, on Blender. Now, chances are you've also been taught that subdivision works it's basically the same thing. Yes, certain meshes do require to be subdivided, and you don't have to go over to ZBrush, and subdivision should get you the high poly that you're looking for, or if you're after a quad resolution but also a mid poly, then subdivision is definitely the way to go. But in this cases, especially in weapons and things like that, this is definitely the process that's being used in the industry a lot. So I hope this video was useful in any case, and I'll see you next time.